We're live. Right, thanks everyone for having me along today, and really appreciate the opportunity to present to New Zealand educators on the co-op business model. So just for those of you who haven't met me, my name's Roz Henry. I'm the CEO of Cooperative Business New Zealand. We're the membership body for New Zealand's cooperative agencies here, or I shouldn't call them agencies, businesses here in New Zealand. And this is a great opportunity, as I say, to start to engage with our educators in the across New Zealand. So I'm just going to share my screen and start a slideshow for you. And I was just discussing with the team that what we'll do is if you save your questions to the end. Now, has that come up as a full screen for all of you?
Yep.
Great. So you're not seeing speaker notes, you're just seeing...
No, we're just seeing the screen.
The slide. Great.
Yep.
Okay. So just to give you a bit of background about me in terms of why I'm so passionate about the model. So I studied at Otago. I did food science, food marketing, started a career at Unilever Bayer, and then ended up at the Dairy Board. And so the Dairy Board at that time was formation of about 13, 14 cooperatives that formed the Dairy Board. I then subsequently went on into the UK and worked in management consulting, working for big multinationals, big corporates, and also government agencies. So I got a whole lot of experience working across those types of businesses. And then subsequently I came back to New Zealand, and I worked for Auckland Tourism and Events and Economic Development. So I worked for the international investment team. And what was interesting there was I was very much focused on bringing in foreign direct investment. So recognising that, you know, if an economy is not growing, then you're not going to succeed. So I think what's been interesting for me is I've had that experience working in co-op, corporate world, government world, and it's only now that I really truly appreciate the value of the business model and what the potential it has to support New Zealand as a nation, and also especially after COVID in terms of how do we navigate this period of adversity. So I'll just run you through these slides. So in terms of Co-op Business New Zealand, we are effectively a membership body, a little bit like Hort New Zealand or Federated Farmers. So we're really here to be the voice of New Zealand co-ops and bring our members together. We basically champion their causes, so we do a lot of lobbying and advocacy work in terms of Wellington and engaging with the regulators. And we also do building co-op capability, which is what we're obviously here today with you, trying to support. But we do that specifically for our members as well. So we do a lot of governance education, recognising that the governors of a co-op are effectively shareholder directors. So that is a real difference about the model. So you always have shareholder directors running the business, which is a big key component of the success of these businesses. So this just gives you a sense of the organisations that we work with. You can see they sit across multiple sectors. So when we were established in the 80s, we were specifically just in agricultural space. And so if you look at that, obviously you can see Fonterra, you can see LIC, Alliance, Silverfern Farms. You've got a whole lot of suppliers to those organisations. So you've got Ravensdown and Balance, Rural Co, Farmlands, etc. And then there's quite a range of banks in terms of credit unions and building societies and actual banks. So SBS Bank, Co-op Bank, Rabobank. So if you look at this, you'll see that we've got really broad cross-sector of businesses that actually pick up the co-op model, and a lot that people don't actually appreciate are co-ops. So Mitre 10 people don't realise as a co-op. Foodstuffs in terms of Pack and Save and New World, Four Squares, those are all cooperatives. And so each of those business owners of those organisations are a member of the cooperative, and that's what makes them very unique. If you just look globally for a minute, globally there's about 3 million cooperatives, and they generate about $3 trillion in annual revenue, so that's in US dollars. So they equate to about the 5th largest economy in the world behind USA, China, Japan and Germany. So they are a major player internationally in the world of business. They generate about 1.2 billion, or they've got 1.2 billion members located across 145 countries, and they create about 280 million jobs. So what's interesting is that you've got your members, and there's a whole lot of members sitting there, but then they also employ people. And we don't in New Zealand have full visibility. We can see how many members we've got, which I'll show you shortly, but we can't actually get a sense of how many people do they then subsequently employ into their businesses. So internationally, these businesses provide services, infrastructure, basically that makes societies thrive, and they generate wealth. And I think there's a misconception that this is a socialistic model. It's not about profit generation. They absolutely are about profit generation for the individuals involved in those businesses, and that's why they are highly successful, because they ensure that the loyalty of their member is long term. So if you look at the life cycle of these organisations, it tends to be long. We just celebrated SBS Bank's 150th last year, and next year we're celebrating Fonterra's 150th. So they're highly sustainable, highly resilient, especially in times such as we're experiencing right now with COVID. The other thing is that you'll see, obviously this slide is a nice pictorial, but you'll see a whole lot of countries that would be classified as third world. Yes, this is a really positive solution for a lot of those sorts of economies, but what's really interesting is that often we move from them being very basic businesses, let's say copra production in Kiribati, to becoming quite sophisticated businesses over a period of time. So the key difference is that they are owned by members. They're not owned by private investors outside. And so the ownership and control is continuously with those members, and that's part of that why they are so enduring. So for us here in New Zealand, we're actually part of a wider global group called International Cooperative Alliance. International Cooperative Alliance works very closely with World Trading Organization, and it's also very engaged with the UN. So part of that obviously is UN sustainability goals, which is very important to us here in New Zealand right now. And a lot of organisations are now already having to do SDG reporting as part of their annual reports. So I think the sense is that there is a recognition of the need to move away from the capitalistic business model, where they're very profit driven and short-term thinking for today and tomorrow. And the other point that's quite interesting, and I'll take you into it, is the Rochdale principle. So all of these global co-ops, in their constitutions, they've all basically got 7 Rochdale principles that they align to, and that's what keeps them same. But what's also important to note is that those Rochdale principles are constantly maintained by the ICA, the International Cooperative Alliance, in conjunction with World Trading Organization. So they do remain relevant for organizations today. So here in New Zealand, we're in 2014 recognised as the most cooperative nation in the world, i.e. we have the largest number of co-ops per capita. And so I'll just quickly run you through a bit of background. So just in terms of the business model, I don't know how well you can see the slide on the right, but just to give you a concept, so we'll use Fonterra here because everyone knows Fonterra. You've got Fonterra as the distributing co-op, which is the darker grey blob at the top. And then you've got the members, which is the farmers. And so what happens is that the member is trading product with the distributing co-op. And then some of that surplus is at the end of the financial year, which is classified as a rebate or a dividend, is given back to the member based on how well the actual cooperative itself has done. And then obviously that they need to retain profits as well to reinvest in the business, which is those little loops at the top. So you can't be classified as a cooperative unless there is a commercial transaction between the member and the co-op. and that they're there to provide commercial services and benefits for their members. That's just the fundamental principle of this business model. So here in New Zealand, the first co-ops were established in the 1850s, and I mentioned SBS Bank's celebrated its 150th year. And in the 1900s, we started seeing legislation being implemented that enabled the establishment of organisations such as Foodstuffs, Electricity Ashburton, and Market Gardeners. And then in 1996, the New Zealand Co-op Companies Act was passed. So what's quite neat, the photos on the right, there's sometimes noise made about these businesses not being innovative. As you can see on the right, yes, those are linked to some of the dairy co-ops across New Zealand. The trucks at the bottom are actually battery driven. So they're battery powered trucks, which back then was highly innovative and outside of people's potential concept of what was feasible. So just quickly running through in terms of the size and scale of the New Zealand economy, this is based on a research that we did back in 2014, which we can make available to you. It was called the New Zealand Cooperative Economy, and the total revenue is 44 billion. That equates to around 19% of New Zealand's GDP, and they've got a significant asset base, so 33.5 billion. That total membership is 1.5 million people. So if you actually think about New Zealand's population and think, hey, that's actually a quarter of our population or a third of our population sitting within those memberships. What's interesting is a lot of those individuals are actually members of multiple cooperatives. So if you've got a Silver Fern Farms in the middle, they might also be a member of Alliance or, not Alliance, but Ravensdown, or Balance. They'll be a member of Farmlands or Rural Co. They might be a member of SBS Bank. They might be a member of FMG. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, and it's really important to the New Zealand economy, which I don't think is really fully understood. I mentioned before in terms of the employment. So these organisations, in terms of the dark grey blob, the actual co-op body itself, they employ about 50,000 odd people. And so if you look at the charts on the right, so blue being for the agri-food based organisations, so you can see in terms of revenue, obviously a significant proportion is in the agri sector. But if you look at yellow, which is insurance, banking and financial services, in terms of membership numbers, the majority of membership sits within those areas, and that's what's not really fully understood. So Southern Cross is a co-op. It has 800,000 members. We've got ProCare, that's a co-op. They have 180 GP practices across New Zealand, and again, they service about 80,000 members into those organisations. And then in terms of sector, again, it's very broad. So in New Zealand, we have got lots of different sectors that operate within co-op world, and retail is obviously one part of that as well. So just to give you some sense of size and scale of our co-ops here in New Zealand, Fonterra, Foodstuffs, North Island and South Island and Farmlands are currently sitting in the World Co-op 300 report. So just to give you the sense that we are a very significant player. So compared to other developed economies, we have got a significantly greater proportion of agri. Internationally, there's a much higher proportion in the financial services, banking and retail sectors. And in New Zealand, typically no one has an external investment from a third-party source. However, as a co-op, you can have up to 40% external investment. And what's really special about the model is that 2/3 of cooperatives here in New Zealand are over 25 years of age. So it just shows how sustainable the model is. If you go into corporate world, most organisations don't survive past 5 years, is the reality. So that's just to give you a bit of a sense. This slide here really just tries to give you a sense of the advantages of the model. And obviously I'm I'm a big advocate, but I also recognise that you need a mixture of different businesses to create a competitive economy. The special thing and what we often hear is about the special culture of these businesses that comes about, and it's about that whole people working together for a common benefit. And we saw that especially during lockdown. We saw the fact that, you know, with COVID, these organisations pretty much were all classified as essential services, and their members all came together to make sure that they were there to support the New Zealand economy get through this period. So the fact that they are owned and controlled by their members means that when times are tough, they are able to come together and work out, okay, how we're going to navigate this period of adversity. What are we prepared to cut back on? You know, what can we do without? And so it's the benefits given back to them is not based on how much they invest, it's about how much they transact with the business. So the neat thing too is that often these businesses are multi-generational. So you might have a financial services company and the next generation will come in and take over from mum and dad. And so it's a really neat thing. And it's one of the areas that I feel really passionate about, that there's a big opportunity to actually engage with iwi on this and offer this solution to them. At the moment, you know, there's a lot of trusts and corporates being set up to support them, but because there's such little education on the business model, the advisors, whether they be lawyers or accountants, actually don't understand the business model. So often they're not given this as an option to consider. So they service their members by providing the best commercial outcomes. That's really important to note. So they are very much about maximising profit, but not at the expense of all else. It's about creating that mutual bond between transacting shareholders, and I'll just drop into those Rochdale principles in a moment. Yes, so what's quite interesting too is that they often come about when there's a market imbalance. So right now I'm being regularly phoned up by the hospitality industry, the tourism industry. Can we form a co-op? How do we go about this? What do we need to do? We really want to survive this period. So this is where they all come together, they collaborate, they look at what services that they can actually reduce cost on and use in terms of negotiation. So that's really important. And the other side is that right now there's a recognition, hey, we need to support NZ Inc. And that is a key part of this business model, that the profit remains in the country of origin. So on the right there, you'll just see the different types of cooperatives that we have here in New Zealand. And it's a real range. So I'll just give you some examples of the different types. So a producer co-op is basically like milk, you know, beef, cattle, etc. Consumer is more in the banking space, or insurance space, where you're actually consuming the product. We have staff-owned or employee-owned. You'll hear them referred to with Lumio, which is, and we've seen a number of other ones coming about, and that's quite often formed like in a partnership model. So you could say like a law firm or an accounting firm could very easily be a co-op.
Lumio, Roz?
Lumio. Lumio, yes, yeah. L-O-O-M-I-O, not the teeth whitening place.
No,
yep. They do the technology which enables decision making, strategic decision making.
It's part of Shayna and Sinead. They're part of Inspiral.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So the purchasing supply chain one is like a Mitre 10 or a foodstuffs, where they enable maximising procurement and supply chain, and they do the branding. Banking is obviously very obvious, and then insurance and mutual. So FMG's got its own legislation. Societies, we've got a number of societies. Southern Cross is a friendly society. Housing is a really big one. Internationally, in Europe, 20% of housing stock is cooperative housing. In New Zealand, we seem to have this view as you either have full home ownership or you have social housing. Co-op housing enables people to get a foot on the ladder and actually move to having home ownership. And I think it's a real indictment actually that we keep continuing to produce this social housing, and we think that that's going to fix the problem. I think what it's doing is it's allowing multi-generational people to be put through that mill as opposed to enabling them to move to home ownership. So the way that our co-op housing model works is that you basically have centralised facilities, and then the individuals might initially have a room, or a room with a bathroom, or a room with additional facilities, but the cost of getting into them is very, very low. It means they're not paying rent, so they can get their first foot on the ladder, and then they can move up the ladder. I think it's really important, so we're having a lot of conversations with MPUD about that at the moment. The other one is platform co-ops, and just to give you a scenario, Uber's not a platform, not a co-op, but if you think about the technology, a platform co-op's effectively a technology-based co-op. And with Uber, if you thought about that, if it was a co-op, then the drivers would be the members of the co-op. So that just gives you a sense of the different types of business models that this can be applied to.
There's nothing in education in New Zealand, is there?
No, there's not, but internationally there's quite a lot. Yeah, yes. So it is a shame that that's not the case. I touched before in terms of those Rochdale principles. These are really fundamental, and as I say, they're internationally understood, and they date back to 1761 in Scotland. So there was a whole lot of workers who wanted to lower the prices of oatmeal, and so they came together and they formed a co-op. Subsequently, in 1844, there was a group of Rochdale farmers, which is where the Rochdale principle name comes from, and they couldn't gain credit from the local bank. So they came together and they created their own bank to enable that. So I guess the thing here is that these principles form the ethos of co-ops globally. They're all about long-term sustainability. They're all about business survival and endurance. And it's all about member control and them being in charge of their destiny. And so when I said before about alignment to Maori, it's not just alignment to Maori, it's an alignment to New Zealand ethos. If you look at these principles, they are very key to how we as a community operate as well. That whole thing about number 7, their concern for the community. We saw that with regards to the response from these organisations through COVID. So I think I get very frustrated when I hear them talk about, we've got a duopoly here in New Zealand with foodstuffs and Countdown. Countdown is a corporate. The mothership determines what happens within each of those different businesses operating within the regions. Foodstuffs is a co-op. Each of those different business owners, whether they're based in Remuera or Manukau or in Christchurch, they get to choose what they want to do within their local community. No one's dictating that to them. So they've got a whole lot of control. And so there's a whole lot of things that they do within their communities that's not visible to everyone across New Zealand, whereas when Countdown does something, it's out there for everyone to see. So the media actually doesn't do us any favours with regards to their little understanding of the business model. And as I said, that's basically as a result of the lack of education. That number 6 is really key, that our members will work together. So a big fundamental part of what they do is collaborate and support each other, and that's also important. That piece around education, training and education, it's all about lifting everyone's skill base. So they're really keen to encourage their members to learn new stuff, and that's important. I don't need to go into the other ones because we've pretty much covered them off. But I thought you might just like to see, I've got a couple of videos in here. Hopefully they won't take too long, but it will give you some interesting content. And this is about them being very technology driven as they are today. obviously that's a Fonterra video that I've just shown you there, but I could pull one out for LIC, you know, Birchwood Pack House, Eastpack. They are all very technology driven. I think this is what is really interesting when you hear that comments like these companies are old school. They're not actually, and a lot of international businesses look to New Zealand as the front leaders in a lot of the technology space. So most of them invest a lot back into technology, and so a big part of making sure they're doing the right thing by their members is retaining enough money to invest in their R&D and technology and innovation. And more often than not, they get it right. They don't always get it perfect, but you know, that's business, whether you're a co-op or not. So this just gives you an idea of the different legislation. So it can get a little bit confusing. So co-ops have to be registered. So co-ops will be registered as a company, and also under the New Zealand Cooperative Act as well. But they could be registered, as I say there, in terms of those other 4 legislative pieces of acts. So it's quite broad, and so people do get confused about what is a co-op, what's not a co-op. But across all of them is that those key Rochdale principles, they still are relevant. And so not all of them, but the majority of them, as I said earlier, they will have shareholder directors sitting on their board who will then make decisions on behalf of their members. I've just got a few more slides here to take you through. So, as I said before, they're about generating profit for New Zealand, 19% of our GDP. They support urban and regional New Zealand. They employ local. The majority of manufacturing and processing is completed in New Zealand. They've got some of our most highly successful brands. The key thing is, in terms of New Zealanders being in control of their own destiny. We've seen a lot of businesses get sold offshore, and you know, once we've lost that control, it's very difficult to determine whether that was a wise decision. It might be at that moment in time, but then if you look at the long-term picture, it could actually be, you know, we've sold off the crown jewels without really understanding the impacts. So the thing around, I mentioned about succession planning, it's really important around that whole skin in the game, people having skin in the game. And they are well recognised as being aligned with UN sustainability goals. So I think that there's a lot of talk about climate change, and for New Zealand, obviously it's farm runoffs and waterways, water quality. The farmers of New Zealand, they actually do want to do the changes that are necessary, but the challenge is to do it in such a way that it can still make the business continues to be profitable. So it's getting the timing right in terms of delivering some of those things. As I mentioned before, I'm being approached quite a bit at the moment from a number of individuals and SMEs looking at how they can collaborate and form these businesses during this time. And they create that collective buying power. They also respond to New Zealand being removed geographically. So by consolidating, they get greater supply chain costs or improved supply chain costs. There's a whole lot of information sharing that they do as well, which is really important to navigating these types of situations. So they reduce duplication and costs. And as I said earlier, their psyche, that is very much aligned to the New Zealand psyche. So that's something that I always come back to. So this is just a high-level SWOT analysis of co-ops in the New Zealand environment. We've pretty much covered all of this off in the presentation, so I'll leave this for you to have a look at afterwards. So in New Zealand, current challenges, really, when I go and talk to ministers and regulators, again, they don't fully understand the business model. The advisors, so when I've spoken to, we've got a number of corporate associate members like Buddle Finland, Anderson Lloyd in the legal space, and Deloitte in the financial services space. I say to them, well, how did you learn about being the specialist of co-ops? And they're going, well, we learnt on the job. So at university, it might be spoken about as an alternative model, focuses on corporates, not-for-profits and trusts. And which is crazy, as I say, that 19% of GDP, but we don't actually incorporate it. So a lot of what I'm doing is trying to get that education embedded into tertiary and postgraduate levels. So I'm engaging with the Law Society and Chartered Accounting Australia and New Zealand as part of this, outside of the MOU that I mentioned to you with Massey University. But that's not to say that MOU is not going to allow us to talk to everyone else. We actually want to extend that conversation. I've mentioned about the multiple legislation, obviously the governance skills of people. So I sort of liken it to the school teacher who gets chucked onto the board of the school. Very different skill sets. So our big thing is to make sure we offer governance education programs that will ensure that the people stepping onto the boards have got the right skill sets. They sometimes struggle to get access to capital because obviously the capital raise comes from their members. So how do they actually go about that? And the banks, because they don't fully understand the business model, are a little bit nervous about lending money unless they can see a whole lot of big assets that they can grab onto. Shareholder engagement and loyalty, that's really important as they grow and they morph. How do they keep their shareholders close? So that whole comms piece is really fundamental. I mentioned before about succession planning. Just to use the farming scenario, some of the young ones don't want to go back onto the farm, or the farms have become so valuable it gets almost impossible for the next generation to take over the family property. So these are all the sorts of things that these organisations are working through. It's about making sure that you've got the right senior leadership team so that they really understand how to navigate that tension between their board and them as an exec trying to drive a business. We've mentioned UN sustainability. Right now, a lot of our members are struggling because they need access to seasonal migrant workers, and obviously with COVID, that's a bit of a challenge. And then media has got a big part to play in terms of the messaging that they put out there. So I think just before I wrap it up, this is what I'm hearing from people. They see this as a way of solving the social and economic problems through creating these sorts of organisations that collect buying power. They do come about as a result of adversity, and in terms of us being removed geographically, right now actually it's that's a big strength for us because we are classified as being COVID free. Long may it last. So you'll see there in terms of we are seen as being world leaders in a lot of areas. We also, and Kiwis are known to be innovative. So some of the concepts that are coming to me are fantastic. We've got recycling, we've got aquaculture, we've got musicians, really broad sorts of industries wanting to engage with us. And so that's what our role is really to play. We're supporting startups as well. And so I just, I'll leave you with this video that we put together just to really set the scene. That just gives you a bit of a sense of the New Zealand cooperative environment. If you've got any questions, then sing out.
Awesome, thank you, Roz. Yeah, it was definitely a very nice and powerful video. I guess my question would be, so if we had startups or students who are thinking of, starting their startup under a cooperative model, what would you say for them to be the first steps? Or for us, kind of,
so we
resources first?
Yeah, so what we have here is we've got we ask them basically 8 questions to see if the model is fit for purpose of what they're trying to do, because the key thing is that they really need to understand what is it that is the tradable good that's going through to the co-op. What is it that they're doing that means that the co-op model is fit for purpose. So that's the starting point. The next point is that we actually have a startup guide that we offer to individuals or groups that want to establish co-ops, and we have a provisional membership. So at the moment, I think we've got maybe 20 provisional members with us right now, and so they can join up as a provisional member. We will give them access to senior members who've got experience, who will act more as a mentor to them. We'll give them access to the startup guide to support them through that process. We've obviously got corporate associate members that can be used to tap into for support and guiding them in terms of establishing these organisations. So there's a whole lot of stepping stones. You know, these things don't just come around. It's not like going and setting up a limited company and paying you $150. You actually need to think, well, what is our purpose? And so if you're looking to create a business that's got a different purpose and it aligns with what I've put up here, then the co-op model is the right one. So you really need to make sure that all your members are on the same page and you take them all on the journey with you. But you know, most of them, you can establish a cooperative with a very small number of people. It doesn't need to be massive. You can start out with 2 in some cases. So we're here to support that process if people are interested in going down that route. So that would be where I direct them. The other thing is that we are looking at setting up I'm thinking possibly a 1-month online training program where we can actually, they can dip into it as and when they've got time to start to hear some of the stories of things that people who've been through the process will say, this is what I learned, don't do this, do this, consider this. You know, the examples being, and I don't think it'll be any different for whatever type of company you do, but have you registered, you know, the logins, not logins, the email IDs, whether it be Gmail or .co Outlook or whatever it is, but you know, those sorts of things. And are you trying to keep the IP as a separate vehicle that the cooperative then buys? How do you want to do it? So there's all sorts of different ways of structuring it, and so it's about making sure that you're thinking about, well, how does this work should we decide to demutualise at some point in the future? Yeah, so those are the sorts of things that we would help them navigate.
Okay, nice, thank you, that's very helpful. Sinead or Shana, do you have any questions?
Yeah, mine is
you
like,
go, Shana.
Sorry, like I'm finding it quite hard to get my head around, which is strange because I'm like familiar with a lot of those businesses and I kind of understand it. But so with somewhere like SBS Bank, and are their customers members? Like,
yes.
You know how, you know, certain places will give their customers a dividend or a payout or something. Is that what you're talking about when the profit goes back? But yet, you know, if foodstuffs or foodstuffs, their customers are not members because they are not getting...
So the member...
Sorry.
No, I totally understand. So with a bank or an insurance company scenario, that's a customer-driven cooperative. So the member is the consumer. So if I'm a Southern Cross member and I buy insurance from Southern Cross, I'm a member. The way that
Okay.
Southern Cross works is that the rebate that they provide is included in the claims process. So if you get a policy with Southern Cross, you get paid out a lot more than you should do. I currently am with NIB, so I can say this. You get paid a lot more because they effectively act like a not-for-profit, but they're actually they're a cooperative. So all of the profits are redistributed back out, but they're not given an annual rebate. So it's the way that it's done slightly different.
Down, or you get more advantages in terms of your
exactly, but it's effectively the same thing in terms of how that dollar is treated. With regards to foodstuffs, you as a customer going into the supermarket are not a member of the co-op. The co-op member is the owner of the supermarket. Okay, so what's interesting with foodstuffs versus Mitre 10, because Mitre 10 is also a co-op. So Mitre 10, each of those owners, whether it be a Mitre 10 store, mega store, or a Mitre 10 store, they might own one store, they might own multiple stores, but they actually own the building and the land, okay?
Yeah.
But they are the member. So you as a customer going shopping in the supermarket or in the Mitre 10 are not a member of the co-op. But what you are doing is you're supporting NZ Inc. by going there as opposed to going to Bunnings.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
Yeah, and this kind of the other part of my question was, does that mean that no foodstuffs outlets or Mitre 10s are owned offshore?
That's correct.
Do all of their members have to be in New Zealand?
Well, no, okay, so I'll give you an example. That Rabobank is international. So Rabobank has got banks. It doesn't mean to say, so Interflora is a cooperative. Interflora here in New Zealand looks after the whole of the Asia Pacific region. So you're not just bound by borders, but what it does is that those florists within those countries, the profit remains within those countries. Does that make sense? As opposed to being, so if you go and bank with ANZ, ASB, BNZ, all of that profit goes back to Australia. If you bank with SBS Bank, Cooperative Bank, TSB, which isn't a co-op but effectively behaves like a co-op, all of the profit remains in New Zealand.
Okay, so if it's an international co-op but they have members in New Zealand, it's the fact that those members are benefiting from you shopping within that co-op. Okay, that's correct. I think I get it.
Yeah, so there's not, we don't have a huge number that are cross-border. So Capricorn is one, which is Car Mechanics, Interflora, as I mentioned, Rabobank's another one, but the majority of them are focused solely within New Zealand. So even though Fonterra has got production facilities overseas, all the profit comes back to New Zealand because the members are here in New Zealand. They're not sitting, the farmers, even though they had farms in China, they weren't members of the cooperative.
Okay. And they just use them as kind of more of an external supplier rather than...
Yeah, so that was an investment into a business as opposed to, let's start to have dairy farmers who become members offshore. Our members we are a New Zealand-based business that is core to our brand, and our members are New Zealanders. So their shareholders, who are also their directors, made that decision to not extend the membership out overseas, whereas other cooperatives will do that. But again, the members within the that country of origin will retain those profits that they generate within that community, and the rebates will be paid out back to them based on their how much they trade with the cooperative.
Okay. Yeah, I can see why, like you're saying, you know, understanding and education on the model is a major barrier, because
it's a massive hole. It's just such a massive hole, and it's crazy. Unfortunately, I think the New Zealand system is based on the American education system, which is very corporate driven. And if you go to the UK, they've got Masters of Co-op Studies, but there's a Masters in Australia that was running out of Newcastle. You know, they've got a much larger population than we do here in New Zealand, and they weren't able to sustain that Masters program. So the approach that I've taken here in New Zealand is, I think, unless we can actually embed it into the training programs that you're doing with regards to when you talk about business models, it's just, and this is one of the business models that we successfully do here in New Zealand, so that all the students coming out understand the businesses, so they're not going and entering these organisations and having to learn by osmosis of, well, why is it, what's different? Because I think mentally you go in and you think you're working for a corporate, you sort of forget, well, actually, we're here and we think we report to here, but the reality is we actually report to here. These people here who are supplying us or consuming our product, it's a little clearer when it's a customer, but when it's actually a supplier, you can't just treat them like a supplier. They actually own you. So it's sort of upside down, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's really trying to get people to understand that ethos when they go and work in those organisations. And that's why when I had that experience of working with Dairy Board, you really got that concept, and the culture of those businesses is quite different. You actually really feel, it's a very rewarding feeling of feeling like you're doing something good for those individuals and making a difference in their lives. And so if you look at satisfaction scores of those organisations versus corporates, both with the employees and with the supplier engagement, they tend to be much higher. So culturally, they do tend to have a much stronger ethos of being about the people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've got like a kind of an innate sense that it's a good thing. I don't know, but I've never really known quite why I've got that impression. Like it seems friendlier. You know,
that's absolutely right. It is. There's something to be said about going to a Foursquare and going, actually, this person working here is very likely the business owner, and it's being handed down through the generations.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. Go on, Sinead. I think you had something too.
I think that actually loosely answered one of the questions I had anyway. So I'm okay, thank you. It's quite a fascinating model. I was kind of wondering around the centralization of it and with decision making, and I know that an area it can be slow when there's a lot of voices. So I guess for me, I wanted to know in New Zealand in particular, who would you say would be a great role model to aspire to, and so that when I'm talking to students and sharing the stories, I can be like, oh, like this company, and this company is a great example.
Look, Southern Cross is really impressive. They gave $50 million back to their members over COVID.
Wow.
And, that's pretty impressive. Mitre 10, I think their business model, so I went to the opening of their Te Rapa store down in Hamilton, and I met a couple of the suppliers who work with them, and they just said, oh, these guys are a breath of fresh air compared to, and I won't name names, you can fill in the blanks, of working with these other organisations. And it's just, like I say, culturally they are so strong. Wealth Point's a really interesting one. Wealth Point's basically the old AMP advisors. So when AMP pulled out of the market, they were trying to decide, well, what's the business model we apply? So you're talking about 200 and something share brokers, and they've got their own individual businesses that employ quite a lot of people within those businesses. They decided to form a co-op. So that was transitioning from one business model to another. They've done that really successfully. That they are definitely one to look to. Tatua, amazing. Like the culture in that organisation, just amazing. And I think what's quite interesting is quite a lot of them are nervous to actually shout from the rooftops that they're a co-op, because there's this whole view that they're socialistic or, and poor old Fonterra's been kicked in the teeth so many times. Like the poor old farmers have been demonised something over the years. But now with COVID, it's suddenly like, oh, actually they're really important, and thank you farmers, you're doing us a real favour, which it's a funny thing that's had to happen to actually make people sit up and go, oh, actually we wouldn't be eating if it wasn't for these individuals who slog slog day and night to make sure that they're the media loves a negative story. You don't get a lot of positive stories out of them. So so Fonterra, they've turned that ship around. They were really struggling, and the messaging from them, so I went to a presentation with them end of last year, and they said, hey, look, we recognise we lost contact with our members, we lost contact with Wellington in terms of the regulators and the ministers, and we were arrogant with some of the media. So they've really worked hard to, and I've got somewhere here, I don't know where it is, but somewhere here, this is it. So I don't know if you can see this, but basically they're really promoting very hard that co-op ethos. So basically it's our cooperative empowering people to create goodness for generations, you, me, us together, tātou, tātou. So I think there's a really strong ethos that these organisations have, and it doesn't get out there enough. They work hard to make sure that they're doing the right thing by their members, and it's not always easy. As I say, there's a bit of tension between the exec team and the board, but it also keeps them honest. So New Zealand hops is a really interesting one.
New Zealand hops.
So they make the beer hops.
All right.
They're doing some really neat things, and they sell. So a lot of these organisations are exporters.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. So
That's
there's I think there's about 12 or 15 in there who are in the hort space, and then there's a whole lot of
down.
So you've got Boysenberry, New Zealand. You've got MG, which is Market Gardeners. You've got Seasonal Solutions that they do all the picking. You've got Pack House, Birchwood Pack House, East Pack, Walnuts New Zealand, Black Currants, Marlborough Grape Growers. So all of them sit in that hort space. So it is really interesting, but you'll look at that and go, where's the Maori co-ops? And at the moment we've got very few, and I find that really disappointing. I think there's a big glaring hole there that we could actually do some really neat things with that community.
Can you, just a quick one, can you call yourself a co-op even though you're not? If you know what I mean?
No, legally you can't call yourself a cooperative unless you're operating underneath those principles.
Nice.
So Zespri is, although it is operating underneath all of those principles, Treasury actually put in place legislation that it couldn't be a co-op, and the reason why is they didn't want Fonterra and Zespri as two major co-ops operating, but they are effectively a co-op, so they can't call themselves a cooperative, even though they operate under cooperative principles. So legally you can't. But then
the brand will call itself, like something comes to mind, there's something called the Brewers Co-op. It's a brand.
So I've got a photo. If you ever look at my Facebook page, I've got a photo of me with their Wellington pub with the Coop sign next to me.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
laughing about it. Look, they probably shouldn't be called a co-op, but it's not my mandate to go out and police it. It's I think it's interesting times because people are starting to, they like the concept of the co-op. So there's another one, Wellington Council is doing something where they provide fruit and vegetables to the local community, and it's called a cooperative. It's not actually a cooperative, it's actually so those are just sort of examples to give you, but funnily enough, those individuals have actually approached me and saying, hey, we actually want to do this formally now.
Nice.
Can I ask one other quick thing? What is the difference with like an association or a society? Like is like SBS is that Southland? Yeah.
So that's
Is it society? It's one of those S's of society, like or is
yeah. So Southland Building Society. So it is a society.
Yeah.
But it became a bank.
So,
I think SBS, it moved from being a it is a society. You're correct.
Yeah.
So it's registered under. I'll just see if I can pull up that slide about the legislation. And I don't want to put you wrong when I say this.
Okay.
Yeah, so SBS Bank is registered under the Friendly Societies and Credit Unions Act.
Okay. And so you can be a society and a cooperative, like those.
Well, they are a cooperative. So anything there, it's just that there's a whole, like I say, there's a whole lot of different legislation. So all of these, what makes them co-ops is that they're all member owned, and they all have those principles that they operate under.
Okay, and it just might have slight differences, and therefore there's, for everything related to farmers, they'll be registered under Farmers Mutual Act. If you're
no, Farmers Mutual Act is only for farmer FMG.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that act was done for one organisation, which is the insurance body for the Friendly Societies and Credit Unions. It's all the credit unions. And the Friendly Society, as I mentioned, is Southern Cross that we've got here. And Industrial and Provident Society Farmlands sits underneath that. There's a number of building societies. So you've got the Wairarapa Building Society, you've got Nelson Building Society. They're effectively no different than a credit union. They operate in a very similar way. The majority of businesses sit under that New Zealand Cooperative Act.
And I guess if you're looking at establishing a co-op, you get advice, like you said, from yourselves and, from lawyers who specialize, and they would be able to determine which act you need to be registered under or what applies. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the majority would, interestingly, so if you go for the New Zealand under the Co-ops Act, you can just register under the New Zealand Companies Act and not have to register under the Co-op Act. So, but the reality is most people choose to do that. They want to be recognised as a cooperative, and the fact that they are operating under those principles, because that's fundamentally important to them.
So something like the AA, like the Automobile Association, they are not a co-op.
So I think they are an incorporated society, so they don't redistribute any profits. So you pay a membership fee every year, and it disappears into the big black hole, and then the corporate office uses those funds to do whatever they like. Whereas if that was a cooperative, you might pay your This
year during COVID, they gave money back, which is what made me think, maybe they are a co-op, but then they're not on your list. So
no, they're not.
They're
not. Paper Plus is a co-op, very similar to Mitre 10 type scenario. So we don't have every single co-op with us right now. I've only been in this role for 12 months, and to be honest with you, probably 5 years ago, it was an old boys club who used to get together at the pub and have a bit of a yarn. We are very much now a professional business, and I've got a lot of expectation. So what's quite neat is that we've got our business awards coming up on the 26th of November this year, and the organisations that have been nominated and for Leader of the Year, Business of the Year, Emerging Leader, really outstanding individuals. And so, this is all just part of getting their profile out there. So a big part of what I need to do is to do that whole advocacy piece and telling the story and getting their good stories out there so that people are aware of what they are doing on behalf of New Zealand and on behalf of their members. So it's a process.
Yeah. Okay. I think I need to do more reading, because it's just, I think once it clicks in your head, it probably all suddenly makes sense.
Well, I don't know.
And I think I'm halfway there.
Yeah. If you've heard of Simon Sinek, he's an American chap. he's a big advocate of this model. He talks about social businesses. So I think this goes a little bit broader than that. So it's not just meeting social need, it's social, economic and community. There's lots of different areas. But if you like Simon, he's worth, that he talks a lot about the co-op structure.
Okay, thank you.
Are you, last one, sorry Ross, are you aware, is it correct that there's a university in Spain that's a co-op? Have you heard of it?
Yes, I have heard that. So Spain's got quite a significant proportion of co-ops, and yes, I think it's an employee-owned co-op in terms of the lecturers are the owners of the co-op, so they've actually come together to form it. Yeah, and I believe that's very successful. So in the UK, you've got a whole lot of co-ops, like their football teams are cooperatives.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so all the members the supporters actually own the football stadium and everything to do with it, and the club and the team.
Excellent.
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways of applying it. It doesn't need to just be for straightforward business purposes. There's social areas and community areas that it's quite relevant. So it's just different how you apply it depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Ross. Really appreciate it. So
it's lovely to be able to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad I didn't miss that. Thank you.
And yeah, just if you could share the recording with me once it's finished converting, then we can pass it on to Martin, and I think he'll find that interesting too. And yeah, it's great. Well, have you heard back from Richard Chatterton, who I introduced you to from Co-Starters? Has that?
No, don't think so. But to be honest with you, it's been a bit of a crazy few weeks. We've had, like I say, we've had the business awards and we've had a whole lot going on. And I've got a board meeting on Monday. So if I haven't responded,
it might be that he might have not responded. So who knows? But
yeah. But I just apologise. If I disappear into a hole, just give me a prod, because I'm just aware that I'm a little bit too stretched at the moment.
No, that's all good. I just didn't want that to kind of sit with him, because they're responsible for the printing and the changing of the curriculum that we use in our teaching, and it would be a matter of next time they're doing a reprint, adding a paragraph.
That would be amazing if you did that. One of the things I didn't mention, so with the IOD, I don't know if you've heard, they do a 4 Pillars journal. It's for all of the directors in New Zealand.
Oh yes, yep.
And so I had a bit of not a stoush, but I had words with them to say, you've got this business model that is here, as I say, 19% of GDP, and you've got that much in a 300-page document about the model. So anyway, we've now got 4 pages.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's it's really a work in progress. So the more I can encourage people like yourself to incorporate it into your education programs, I would really appreciate it.
Yep, no worries. So I'll just make sure next time I talk to him about it, or talk to him about something else, I'll mention just following up with you on that introduction, and then you guys can work on that. That would be good.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Well, hey, thanks so much. Yes.
I just asked one thing. The startup guide that you talked about, is that something that you only get once you are a provisional member, or is it something that we are able to look at? Or
I can give you a copy of it. It's to be honest with you, it's not great at the moment. It needs a really good revamp, and we're working on doing that in the new year. It's written, the terminology in it is not great, and it's very old school in its style. So I'm happy to share it with you, as long as you just keep it to yourselves. So
I just wonder if it would help us to understand.
Yeah, just so you know, provisional membership is $300 with us, so it's not prohibitive in terms of price. And you may have a group of students that want, or even AUT may say, hey, we want to get a provisional membership so that we can have access to the that material. And that might be appropriate given the conversation that we're having. So that might be something that you want to think about as well. But like I say, it needs a lot of work. It's not pretty at the minute.
Yeah. No, it was more just that it might understand, like, if we are encouraging people to kind of look into this, what, you know, what
Shayla, you
gonna
are breaking up.
be. Am I breaking up? Okay, that's all right. I think I'm done anyway. Thank you.
Hey, I'm going to have to head off. Lovely to see you. Thanks for organising this, Sabrina.
No worries, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Roz.
Bye.
Thank